I get the most feel for honey when I make a trad with it. And I make a lot of trads. I just want to learn a lot of honeys. Like I'm in the process of learning a lot of honeys.
It's like having a base IPA recipe if you're a hop explorer of sorts.
Right.
Hello everyone, welcome to Chop and Brew. I am Chip Walton. In this episode, I embark on a most epic flight of traditional meads with two mead masters, Steve Fletty and Josh Holbrook. Traditional meads are those made with a single variety of honey and very little else as a way to showcase the characteristics and flavor attributes of that honey. Over the course of almost a dozen examples, we try meads made with honeys from all over the world and learn just how different and unique each honey variety can be. With every mead, I also ask the guys a lot of technical questions about everything from mead making techniques and sourcing honey to judging meads made with honey that you might not be familiar with. We hope you'll watch the whole thing and have a great time learning as we taste these meads, but if there's something you're particularly interested in, I'll put the timestamps for the different topics in the video description so you can skip right to it. Steve and Josh were also nice enough to share some recipes. Fletty provides a roadmap to making a basic traditional mead for just about any single variety honey you might find. And by popular demand, Josh Holbrook hooked us up with the recipe for his Kung Pao cousin, a pepper-spiced mead you might remember us tasting as part of last year's 12 Beers of Christmas video series. I'll link to those in the video description, as well as to a playlist of all of Chop and Brew's mead and mead-making content from over the years. Before we deep dive into these trad meads, a quick shout out to Imperial Yeast for their ongoing support of Chop and Brew. Imperial's new I-22 Capri is a hybrid yeast strain now available to homebrewers and highly recommended for citrus-forward, hoppy ales, and hazy IPAs. More info at imperialyeast.com. And of course, our honeybees running the hive over at Patreon. Join them in supporting Chop and Brew's efforts at patreon.com/chopandbrew. Because you know, we love some mead. Ping!
We are here in lovely Falcon Heights, Minnesota, home of the Minnesota State Fair. Also, home of Steve Fletty. I'm going to give out his exact address right now. Beep. So we're here with Josh Holbrook, Steve Fletty, myself. These guys are mead makers of the year of various organizations. I am not. And we're taking this opportunity to drink a handful of traditional meads. This means a mead that is just one honey and that's it. Right? No berries, no nothing else's. But we'll talk about it. There could be something else's. Mm-hmm. But okay, so what we're hoping here is it'll be a nice palate to judge and learn what some different honeys are about. The first one up, Hairy Vetch.
No, I'm not going to show you my Hairy Vetch.
Yikes.
So first of all, cheers. Thanks for gathering this together. I've never had so many meads available to pick from. Hairy Vetch, this is a Fletty mead. Tell me about it.
Hairy Vetch is a monofloral from Montana. It actually got voted, I forget which some sort of World Honey organization voted this Honey of the Year a few years ago. Yeah,
a couple years in a row, I think.
And it's a very interesting honey. It's quite pale. I guess you could call that water white. It's herbal. Floral. I used a unique yeast on this that's a combination of sac and paradoxus. Brings out a lot of tropical notes and makes it nice and crisp and floral.
What is the honey itself? So the yeast are helping to make some of those notes you just described. What is the backbone flavors of the honey if you were to just be toothpicking it?
Oh, I should have brought some up. I have a little left. How would you describe it?
The times I've had it before, I get a lot of vanilla. First time I ever had it, it tasted like almost like cotton candy, like a candy, like not just the sweetness, but like the confectionery kind of, light, bright. Yeah, this is a little more herbal and than other examples I've had. It's kind of neat hearing about the different yeast because it tastes a lot different than some of the others I've had. But it's really nice, like crisp.
So part of what we're doing here is we're seeing what different honeys, how different the spectrum of honey is, but we've been pre-drinking a little bit and just listening to you guys talk about, I mean, it's almost like vintages of honey. There can be from so many different places. They can be different tiers of quality.
Yeah, that's something maybe some people don't realize is that, even if it says it's, blackberry blossom, if there's other floral sources in the area, the bees will be visiting those as well. So most honey is probably, I don't know, I'm not sure. You're a beekeeper. Is there a designation, what a percentage that it has to be?
It's surprisingly low for it to be monofloral. It's only 45%.
Oh.
Yeah, you'd think it'd be like 50, 55, but no, I'm pretty sure from what I've read, it's 45%. And like this, I think the only place to buy this is Yersa, like the Montana supplier. And I know from year to year, you mentioned vintage, it has been really different. They had one year that was not like this at all. They had a lot more wildflower bloom at the same time, so they had a lot more other floral, contributors in this honey where it was less pure. I mean, it was probably still about that 45%, but the character is a lot different because of that, because of the other contributors.
Yeah, I get a lot of kind of what you're saying, that cream, soda, vanilla. It's interesting when you say confectionery sugar, because like you're like, yeah, I get that powdery sweet aroma, but clearly it's dry. It's got some tingle to it because it's carbonated. It's not dry. I mean, it's crisp. It's carbonated.
I get tropical fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah, even the mouthfeel, I think, is a lot different because of that yeast. Like, on this one, did you do much other, like, tannin contribution, or?
Oh, I'd have checked my notes. I didn't bring...
You want to go get your notebook? Maybe while Fletty goes and gets his notebook, you can pour up. Yeah, we'll just go back and forth. Like, Fletty went first, so what do you want to present second?
Why don't we do my honey, my Basswood honey from the hives, because it's also really light, bright, crisp
Okay.
kind of one.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, this one, it's almost got like a tiny bit of like bitterness. Not like in a bad way, but like bitterness and like a little bit of tannin. That's why like it's so drinkable. Like, it's really crisp. It's got a little bit of tannin and a little acidity. Like, man, this one is a slammer.
Almost like the bitterness of like a club soda, right? It's almost kind of that, I don't know if equine is the right word,
Like
but it's
tonic water almost.
that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Tonic water,
Yeah.
not club soda. Yep.
Yeah. Tonic water.
Tonic water?
Tonic water is the base, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I really like that. I'm gonna keep that around. Harass man into getting his notes.
Opti-white. Oh, and a little French oak. Like half an ounce in the 3-gallon batch.
Medium?
Medium toast.
Not plus, medium. Just
Medium
regular
toast.
Yeah. A little coconut kind of.
And it was, that was 1068 OG. So not, and it fermented down to 1002. I back sweetened it to 1016. You were close.
So, what is that ABV? That's a little lower than we were thinking. That's probably only 8. Is that your standard process? Ferment,
Pretty
dry,
much.
back sweeten? Yeah. I stopped fermentation for almost everything.
How do you do that?
Just cold crash and sulfite and sorbate.
I've never tried it. You have to be monitoring it though.
Yeah. But it ferments at a pretty steady rate. It's
True.
like, it's dropping 8 points a day. Guess I'm going to put it in the fridge on Friday.
I'm too lazy to check.
9? No, it's still 9. 9%.
Next up, number 2.
So this is Basswood, Minnesota Basswood honey, probably with some other wildflower contribution, but it's actually honey from my hives. So I'm a hobby beekeeper for the last 5 years, a very novice, still learning, not a master beekeeper. But it's fun to get to make mead from your own honey. So I get a kick out of it. I really like it.
Why does Basswood get such a bad rap?
So, I think it's because of the styles people were making. Made me nervous, man. Where everybody was making 15% super sweet, and Basswood honey, I tell people, is like English hops. Really delicious, but I don't like IPA level strength, intensity of those flavors, right? It's going to taste really earthy and really dirty with like English hops. So Basswood, like really crisp and delicious, but if I made it like 15% super sweet, super intense, it's really abrasive. It's just not pleasant.
It doesn't dilute. Through fermentation, taking the sugar away, it leaves way too much of the flavor that could be a little potent if you're making it too high of an OG.
I think. I mean, that's my opinion.
Interesting.
Because the first batch I ever made with my honey, I did in that style. I started high, end high sort of fermentation. So it was like a 15, who knows, ABV and finished sweet. And yeah, it's hard to drink that first batch. But this stuff, this is like 10%, probably 10-20 final gravity.
It's really perfumey and spicy.
Yeah.
I like it. Another pale one.
Yeah.
It's almost got like this herbal, this like dillness to it though. Like there's a dill, I don't know if it's dill seed, dill weed, because I know that they are very different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I usually say mint, but like I see what you're saying. Like it's definitely like a green herb kind of thing.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice.
So to ride your analogy about English hops, a beer to mead analogy, something that I kind of thought of when I was driving over is like what we're about to drink is the equivalent of a flight of smash beers, but in the mead world, because we're talking about honey, water, but here yeast does something that might be very impactful. But we can talk about yeast second. Like talk about honey. Like how different can honeys be, especially if you're making a traditional mead. Like it's interesting that you already just dialed that in about like, yeah, you may not make a 16% of some varieties because they're overwhelming. You might want to aim lower.
Like, and this, I think varietals that are really robust, you know, and there's like dark robust varietals like Minnesota buckwheat.
Minnesota buckwheat, yeah.
If you were to make like a really heavy and high alcohol, intense sweetness thing, like really unpleasant, probably.
Yeah, I once made a 5-gallon batch of beer and added a small container, like maybe a pound of Minnesota buckwheat to that beer, and it just stood out like a sore thumb, and it didn't go, and it was not a good thing. Whereas California buckwheat is another animal altogether. It doesn't have that obnoxious barnyard character.
Funky.
Yeah, it's not as funky. It's really pleasant. So it's sort of it's terroir. Honey terroir is a good analogy, I think.
I think buckwheat and basswood are kind of a neat comparison because I think they're both really robust varietals, but they're on the opposite end of the color spectrum. Like buckwheat's like super dark, sometimes almost black.
Right.
And this is almost that water white. It's got that tinge of green, which is kind of fun. But like super, super light, but really flavorful.
It is. It's nice, crisp, herbal, maybe a little piney.
I usually get citrus, like lemon or lime, sometimes when I'm drinking this. I don't use it in a lot of melomels, but I use it for lighter styled fruits and stuff like that, or a lot of metheglins with like, you know, light spices. I actually tracked down some like super spicy, super hot green peppers, because so many of the super hots are like reds or orange or yellow or whatever. Like you don't find as many super hot greens, so I thought like a super hot green would be a cool pairing with this because it's got like green like flavors in it already.
So when you say it's basswood, and then to go back to what you said about monofloral, so is this in a field of basswood trees? So you are pretty sure? I mean, you don't have a net around a bunch of basswoods that you don't let these bees stray away from, right?
Yeah, so the area where I have the hives just has like a ton of basswood trees around, but it's not like there's not like basswood groves, like you'd have like a berry patch or something where you could stick it in the middle of, and it's all just that one plant. So the bees are going to get a variety of other flowers and nectar contributions going into this honey, but I did take advantage of Texas A&M had a pollen analysis, and I believe his name is Dr. Von Bryant, and he passed away recently, unfortunately, and he is the foremost expert on melissopaleontology, which is the study of like dust, which is usually used for like archaeological purposes for determining like what plants were around at this era in this archaeological dig.
Yeah.
But there's this branch of that that they use for pollen analysis in honeys, so they can take a sample of honey and analyze it and say, this honey is this.
Oh my gosh.
And it's this percentage of this. So that's where like that 45% comes in. So I sent 2 different years of my honey for analysis there, and I think one year was like 83% basswood.
Oh, wow.
And one year was like 60%.
Boom.
So, and I haven't analyzed every year that I've gotten, but I'm assuming majority of the time it's very heavy basswood. As long as it tastes really similar, I'm going to assume that.
So it's like Ancestry.com.
For honey, yeah. Yeah. Well, the bummer is with this, Dr. Bryant passing away is I haven't found anybody that does this analysis anymore.
Really?
Huh.
It's not just like built into their systems at
I don't
Texas
think so.
A&M's like
Nobody's
lab?
taken up his torch
Oh,
that
man.
I've found. I've heard that there might be somebody at the University of Montana who does this kind of analysis, but I haven't been able to get the contact for it, which makes you wonder about commercial varietal honeys that are sold.
Yeah.
Oh, their certifiable percentage.
How do you know?
Yeah.
I mean, probably a lot of them are in a mono cultivar, like a big field of that.
Yeah.
Probably not all of them.
Yeah.
So take the guy's word for it.
What do you want to do next? Keep the party going. Keep the party going.
Are we going from light to dark? Are we just see? I have orange blossom.
Let's do orange blossom.
Oh, this was actually made with the same yeast that I did with the
The hairy vetch.
cherry vetch. Yeah.
OB, orange blossom. Would you say this is the most popular honey? I guess what I'm asking is maybe like, I feel like new mead makers might use this a lot.
Yeah, it's easy to get. It's fairly common. Going to the point of what other floral sources are around. If it doesn't, it varies in quality, or maybe people blend it. But
Oh, pardon my reach.
oops, sorry.
That one's for this one.
Crowd pleaser too. Like everybody likes orange blossom.
Yeah.
You know.
So when you hear the word orange, is that always what you get from an orange blossom, or is it actually kind of
Well, it's not going to be an orange. It's going to be the aroma of the orange blossom,
Right.
the aromatics. If I've never been in an orange grove, but I've heard people say that the honey smells like an orange grove in bloom.
Yeah, like the actual flowers. And any citrus honey is called orange blossom. So this could be grapefruit. It could be tangelo. It could be
Really?
clementine. Yeah, any citrus honey is usually labeled as orange blossom, unless it's, there are sometimes you can find like lemon blossom. They're selling now in some places, and I assume if you go to Florida and you're going to like a grove, you might be able to buy a more specific citrus honey, but usually it's all orange blossom.
okay?
Have you played with like Florida versus Mexico versus California orange blossom?
Not specifically. This is Mexican orange blossom from Bee Seasonal. But no, I've never really sourced it that specifically. I just know that these guys have good honey, and
It's a little less straight up fruity than a lot of the orange blossoms that I've had. You get like a little bit of tea, jasmine kind of thing going on, which is really nice. I think I've only worked with Florida orange blossom, but I've heard the Mexican orange blossom is really nice.
So what is your process, Fletty and also Josh? So if you get a new variety of honey that you've never had or maybe even heard of, what do you do with that for a first mead to get an impression, an evaluation, analysis of that honey?
sometimes it's pretty easy. You taste something, and go, wow, it's just good honey, and I'm going to go with this yeast I happen to know. And sometimes it's it's puzzling. It's like I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to go with a very neutral yeast. A good one is DV10, which just gets out of the way and accentuates the character of the honey.
Have you used Sensi? I know a lot of people use Sensi
Yeah,
for that as well.
Yeah, I like that one. I've done that. I've used that a few times. That's a good one if you want to cold ferment.
It has a lower temp range.
Yeah, definitely a lower temp range. So you want to be in like the 50s, low 60s.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
But it's really clean, right?
Yeah, it's super clean.
That's cool.
And sometimes I'll call people and say, okay, I don't know anything about this honey. Tell me what to do. You got to steal ideas sometimes. You can't know everything.
You probably do what I do. Message Carbon. Say, Carbon.
Yeah.
Carbon, what do I do? I haven't done this before.
We need an Ask Carvin app.
Yeah.
His face on a beehive,
Yeah, like
on a honeycomb. Like Tasty used to walk around with his own like cartoonized sticker. He made a carbon cartoon.
This is neat they use that hybrid yeast in there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems like that's contributing some interesting character too. I think tropical mostly.
Yeah, and I think it gives it a nice little level of acidity that you don't necessarily get from some of the other straight-up wine yeasts.
It's nice to get that from your fermentation and not have to
Exactly.
monkey that in
Yeah.
afterward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like it's coming out of the fermenter balanced. You know.
Yeah, all I did was back sweeten this one slightly.
So I just started rolling, and I made a faux pas, and
I'm
I
not going
forgot
to
to
do it
record.
again. I'm not going to do it again.
This one's over.
This was so good. So this is Black Mangrove. Oh, that's I cannot believe we have to start this all over.
I got you, Chip.
But go for it.
All right, so this is a honey from Florida. So black mangrove, I believe it's a specific type of saltwater plant. I think there's black and red mangrove, and I think I've seen where you can buy like the red mangrove honey too. I've only ever used the black. So the idea is it's saltwater plant, so I think occasionally you can get a little bit of the salinity, the saltiness in here. I really want to try it from different suppliers and just see if it's a big difference, depending on who you're getting it from, if there's like a process factor that matters, because I know it's a really high moisture content honey, so I've heard some beekeepers actually need to warm it up, heat it up slightly to drive off a little bit of the water and make sure that it gets down below the like, I think it's 18.6% to be shelf stable grade A.
Or else it can ferment or mold.
Yeah, just to be stable. I mean, they say honey is like one of the foods that never spoils, but only if it's below that moisture threshold.
Do you, as a beekeeper, you understand that it's not always, it's not a flawless food as far as that. You do have to have patience. You've got to have that eye. I don't even know how you measure moisture. How do you measure
A
it?
honey refractometer.
Is it?
Yes.
No kidding.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, which you want to, like, for beekeepers when they're harvesting honey, they want to make sure that the majority of the frames that they're extracting have capped honey, because the bees cap it when they've dehydrated it enough. So if beekeepers have a lot of uncapped frames, like honey that's not fully cured and that moisture content hasn't been brought down low enough, that some beekeepers will throw some of that in to increase their yield, and it's totally fine as long as the average stays below that 18.6 moisture threshold. But if they're using too many of these uncapped, uncured honey frames, it can bring the average a little bit too high, and it won't be stable then.
This is a very interesting honey. I don't know that I've had a black mangrove before. I get a lot of apple notes to it and sort of like toffee brown sugar character. It's really nice.
Yeah, I don't know if I get the salted caramel kind of thing that I've told people before. I don't know if I get it in this example, but
you've literally tasted kind of like that ocean water salinity in
sometimes.
Yeah. You also said while we weren't rolling the first time, you called these kind of like mid-tone or medium.
Yeah,
sugars.
we're talking about like the sugar spectrum, like white sugar to molasses. I really like this honey varietal because it has so many layers of the mid-range, so like brown sugar, toffee, caramel. So I really like it as a base for bouchées. I've bouchéed this honey before, and I've also used like raw honey in a bouché with this as the raw honey to kind of enhance some of those mid-range sugar flavors. It's just a really nice pairing for certain ingredients.
It's really tasty.
Yeah, to me that is, of the four thus far, that is the most just saturated, sweet, but also the apple is huge. Like, it is very cider-like, but without the other things that a cider also brings. It's just like apple.
I'm thinking you entered this as a sizer, and
Yeah, and I want to blame a
Clean
lot
up.
of the apple and pear notes on my yeast choice, because I think I used clo or kloss. I forget how people say it, and I know some people say when they ferment that yeast at a high temperature, they get a lot of chocolate notes and interesting flavors, but the times I've used it, I don't think I've gotten warm enough with the fermentation, and so I think it throws a lot of the palm fruit, apple, and pear notes, which I think I'm going to blame a lot of that on the yeast in this particular one.
And it doesn't jump out at you, but we talked about how this has oak. And you made an analogy earlier that, like, putting oak in a trad mead is like cooking with salt.
Yeah, there's so many meads that are going to benefit from oak, and it's just varying levels of how much you're going to add or how long you're going to leave it in for. Like some we talked about sometimes it's just that the mead is a little thin, or it just needs a little oomph.
Right.
It seems like it really provides a richness that's not just sweet dependent.
Yeah, it's a body and a mouthfeel thing. A mead, a traditional mead without any oak versus one with a little oak, it just rounds it out, makes it fuller. For example, when I'm making a traditional mead, I'll throw in about a 1/4 ounce of oak per gallon just to give it that tannin. So it's not going to scream oak. It's not. You're not going to taste it and say,
It's
"Oh,
like
that's
bourbon barrel
right."
aged
No,
mead.
not at all.
Well, I think because I do that as well. I use French oak cubes, most often French oak, sometimes American oak cubes in primary.
Yep.
I think we get to thank Carbon for this one again.
We totally stole this idea from Carbon. Thank you, Carbon.
Book of Carvin.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting using that in primary versus secondary, because yeast will actually catabolize, like they'll eat the vanillin in the oak. Like you get a lot of vanilla character from oak, right? Like barrel aged stuff tends to have a lot of vanilla. When you throw that oak in primary during active fermentation, the yeast is going to eat all that vanilla. So like when you're using oak in primary, you don't get that big vanilla bomb, but you're getting a lot of the tannin and mouthfeel and nice things that you're looking for too. So say in a lighter style where you don't want that big hit of toasty vanilla sort of thing, maybe it's just that little bit of primary. Versus secondary, you're going to get a heavy punch of vanilla.
That recipe you sent me last week, or on Mead Day, it had oak in primary, right?
I think it's just a standard thing I'm doing, almost.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
just as a body and mouthfeel, and yeah. I haven't found a lot of ones where I'm like, boy, I wish I didn't use that.
Yeah, yeah.
Too oaky.
Yeah.
Well, that was a good conversation. I'm scared to press pause again.
Pause. Okay. How about macadamia blossom?
Yeah. Have you made multiple? Because I think I've tasted yours before.
Only one.
Okay. I liked it. I remember it.
Fletty, what's number 5?
Number 5, macadamia blossom honey from Hawaii.
Is this a suitcase honey? Did you bring that back?
I did not. No, I've never been to Hawaii. I had to pay a lot of money just to get it here. So this is, I think I used DV10 on this one, and I was going for a specific character where you age the honey on the lees, which is the yeast that falls out, and there are particular yeast.
The honey or the mead?
I'm sorry, I meant mead. I said honey.
Okay,
didn't
I was like, dude, what is this process?
Yes, you're right. You age the mead on the lees, the yeast, and let it go for like 2-3 months, and it gives you like a nutty character.
Really?
It enhances the body, gives you different mouthfeel.
Oh, when you swirl this up, it gives off some like...
I feel like grapefruit zest.
Yeah?
Like, surprising. I didn't expect. It's got like a bright citrus kind of thing, but the flavor's got a lot of nut.
There's like a super ripe mango, like an almost like...
I wonder if this is like a common thread with Hawaiian honeys.
You think so?
Tropical
Could be.
notes.
I've only done this one. I have some lahua. I want to make some lahua. Oh, that's a good one.
There's also kind of like a tamarind. There's something like very...
Yeah?
Not quite soy, not quite teriyaki, but there's just like this...
Savory.
And tamarind itself, I think, is kind of fruity, as well as being like savory and umami.
I get a little nuttiness, for sure. It's weird to think about like the spectrum of nut flavors. Like it's not like a peanut. I mean, macadamia nut makes sense really if I picture like smelling or eating those. Like I get some of that character, especially in the flavor.
We were talking about the mid-range honey flavors. I think this has that same sort of thing we were talking about earlier with the black mangrove.
With a punch of fruitiness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't remember, because I think I've only had macadamia blossom once, and it was probably the same mead. I didn't remember it having that much fruitiness to it, but I really like it. Do you feel like you get a lot of the lees, the surly character?
I think so. It's something I did not steal from Carbon that I...
There's one thing.
Patent pending.
Yeah, I think I've done that in a number of different things. It just rounds out the body and gives it a fuller mouthfeel. I really like it.
Yeah, I don't think I've done it specifically. I think I've done it somewhat on accident, and certainly kind of aged some meads. I know know that you're supposed to do it on just the fine lees, like
Yeah.
you rack off the
Yep.
initial stuff that drops, and then you just get more fine sediment that you age on. And did you stir? I think there's some stirring in the traditional process.
Yeah. For me, it's a carboy, so I would like,
How long did you let it go?
probably 3 months.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I think they say like creamy mouthfeel and maybe some nuttiness.
Yeah.
Right.
And in this case, that technique is specific to this honey.
Specific to yeast.
Oh,
There's only
specific to
specific yeast you want to
Okay.
do that with.
Wine styles.
I think it's a French technique.
I don't know if champagne technically uses that, even though it has a lot of the similar yeast notes in it. I think that's more the in-bottle character they get with champagne. But I think I've heard some white wines that use that technique. They say sometimes they'll have almost like a stale beer kind of aroma to it, like a grainy, somewhat sweet. I'm trying to think of certain styles that I think use it. I think maybe even Pinot Grigio, I want to say, might use it. Because I think they use it for some of these white styles that don't have a lot of backbone.
I know they use it for Chardonnay.
Oh, sure.
So they build more depth
Yeah.
through the interaction of that long contact time with the
I think
yeast.
so. I'm a wine noob, but I'm pretty sure that's what I've learned.
And in their world, that would be yeast. It could also be skins. It could be all kinds of things. But here, it's really just yeast drop out.
I think the technique is for yeast.
It is, definitely, yeah.
Because they've racked off of the fruit or the skins.
Yeah,
And
it's
most
a,
white wines are not fermenting on them anyway.
this is something that happens in secondary, or tertiary even.
I wonder how many yeasts are cool with that technique. I know they say 71B is a bad one, that you'll get like yeast atols, like rubber band kind
Right.
of stuff pretty quickly.
3079 works, DV10. Those are the two that I've used. Uh-oh.
It's you, man.
Not me.
Fletty's getting booty calls. It's not even sunset.
No,
y'all.
someone accidentally tried to start a video chat on...
Hey!
No, accept, dude. Let's see what's going on.
Yeah.
See if they like me.
You want to get in on this trad tasting?
You like trads? This is trad to the bone, baby.
Do you think that needs more acidity?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Might be maybe some age getting to it too.
It's probably 2 years old right now.
Yeah.
That's the last 12-ounce bottle of it.
That fruitiness.
I didn't get the fruitiness before, or maybe I didn't notice it.
Yeah. When I had it a couple of years ago when you had it at a comp, I don't remember thinking it was fruity. I remember thinking just nutty and like mid-range sugar kind of thing.
That's a good, I like that. I've never heard that mid-range sugar thing. I like that.
Well, I feel it too.
description.
Now that we've said it twice, it'll be interesting to see if we like, on the last one, but I think I like those kinds of meads.
Yeah.
It's getting into almost like a more concentrated flavor sweetness, but maybe I could see it also happening in a mead that's not that residually sweet too.
Robust stuff is really
Right.
fun.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I think I got that from Jamil because he was talking about some porters being weak on mid-range flavors like that. You know, like it's just grain and smoke or roast or whatever.
super
you know,
roast,
but it's
yeah.
missing that.
The brown malt. Oh yeah, get out your notes, Fletty.
What the
Here,
fuck I might
I'll
be
serve
talking
you,
about.
sir.
Harass the notes out of you in the middle of it.
So we're about to get Fletty's Coffee Blossom.
Guatemalan coffee blossom.
I think you can get coffee blossom from probably a lot of places. I think there's Mexican. I know I've bought the Hawaiian. I've used Hawaiian coffee blossom.
How was that?
Tropical, man.
Yeah?
I got it. We can taste it. in a
Oh,
little bit.
cool. We should do side by side.
Coffee versus coffee.
Coffee versus coffee smackdown.
This isn't brown like coffee. Jip. Wow, that is a beautiful color and clarity, though, for sure.
It's got horsepower. I don't know what the notes are yet, but
Can't find it.
Jumps in your nose.
Where did it go?
I think red fruit,
Red fruit.
like cranberry.
Oh, here we go. DV10. And, yeah, a little French oak.
What are the OGFG back sweetens?
OG 1073, fermented down to 1008, back sweetened to 1022.
Stopped at 10:08.
Yeah, that was weird. I get a lot of earthy notes to this honey.
Yeah.
And there are...
I think that's what I would expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a few coffee blossoms. I've only made, I think, one, but earthiness, I think, is a
And there are
pretty
some
common.
coffee notes to it, I think, as well.
Yeah, I thought that was weird in the ones I've had, too. It's like, I thought all the coffee flavor is going to be the roast. It's kind of weirdly in the honey.
So this one is like super neutral yeast, DV10. That's all the honey talking, nothing else.
And I guess that's something to talk about because, you know, in the world of melomels, it's just like it's honey, but then there's these berries and maybe there's other berries. Like with a traditional mead, you fermented X amount of the sugar of the honey out. What are these components that get left behind?
Probably esters, and I don't know what the actual chemical compounds, but, I mean, yeah, that's a good question. We gotta look at your nosedive book.
My what?
Your nosedive book.
My nose. Oh yeah.
Yeah, you get the actual chemical compounds.
Yeah, and I didn't mean so much. I guess I meant like what are the essences that are still...
So you're getting that character left behind. You're taking the sweetness down through fermentation, but you're leaving the inherent character that makes this honey unique. You're leaving that in there. I mean, some of it's going to blow off with fermentation, and maybe you're adding a little bit from yeast, from whatever strain you use, whatever the fermentation character is going to add.
Because we talked about a little bit earlier when Fletty busted out a jug of Oaxacan jungle honey. You were saying that sometimes it's hard
I couldn't
to
finish
taste
it.
past the sweetness of a new honey to figure out like how is this different from other honeys or where does it fit. So there is definitely a benefit to having some sugar removed to have the other things amplified, I guess, or
Yeah.
isolated almost.
I know a lot of really great mead makers that maintain honey libraries where they have like their little sample jars of all these, and they're going to taste and get the nuances and know what they want for a certain recipe. I don't feel like I get a really good feel for the honey when I'm tasting the honey itself, tasting it raw, because I just am not very good at tasting past the sweetness.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard.
I wonder if it would almost be better to like dilute it even with just water
Some people do.
or something
Yep,
else.
to like even a set gravity, like a normal OG, say, and tasting it that way, and so there's less sweetness. But I've tried that, and I get the most feel for honey when I make a trad with it, and I make a lot of trads. I just want to learn a lot of honeys. Like I'm in the process of learning a lot of honeys.
It's like having a base IPA recipe if you're a hop explorer of sorts.
Right. Well, they say there's like over 300 varietal honeys in the United States alone, and so internationally,
That's wild.
there's still going to be a lot more than that.
Oh yeah.
So I think I've made it through like 35. My goal is 10 a year.
Nice.
Okay.
So
What scale do you make these on since you're making so many?
it depends on how much honey I bought, and if I know that I'm really going to like it, if I'm really excited about it, and I have a lot of it, I'll make a full 5-6 gallon batch. A lot of mine end up being like a gallon and a half. I just do in like a little 2-gallon bucket,
Yeah.
and it's enough to get a feel for. I might, I have a couple bottles I want to put in a comp or two, but a lot of it's for personal education.
And you said when we were kind of setting this up, you're like, these are not all like 50. These are not 50-point meads. Like these are analysis meads. But I haven't had a bad one yet.
Yeah.
It
But
could be the quality of honey. It could be the quality of the processor.
Speaking of the quality of honey, if you have a new honey that you're thinking of fermenting, taste it, smell it. If it doesn't taste good, if it doesn't smell good, don't ferment it. Fermentation is not a magical process that's going to transform an ugly dog into a best of show.
Wow.
I feel like you're previewing one of the next ones.
Yeah. Should we have a bad one? Should we have a?
Let's
not
do
a
the
bad
coffee
one.
and coffee. I got mine sitting here.
Okay.
Let's do side by side.
It's another coffee blossom.
This is Hawaiian coffee blossom.
Ooh. Okay. So here's
little-
Guatemalan.
And this is pretty, I think I bottled this like 2 days ago. I think it was freshly kegged into my little tiny keg and carbonated quick with the intention of being able to bring some here. The color is pretty different.
Oh wow, it's really
Neon
yellow.
Yeah. So this is Hawaiian coffee blossom that I got from this Sean Darrell Harris, he's getting to be a really popular supplier for a lot of folks like us. A lot of folks are buying his honey. He's got some really interesting varietals of different Hawaiian honeys, and I have a couple of them. I also have his lemon blossom.
This is a lot fruitier.
That's why I almost wonder if there's a common thread with Hawaiian honeys where there's like a really strong core of fruit.
I mean, I get some of the similar elements where the Guatemalan's really earthy, and I get the coffee notes. I get some of that earth, but it's underneath the fruit in this one.
I get a weird amount of almost roast in the aroma.
There's like, I was going to say there's like this light smokiness, but it's also getting a little like musty, like dank, as people would say if this was more of a beer world. But like I just feel like it's got a little bit of just like
It's probably
tart,
sweeter.
tang, something, even in the nose, not even the flavor yet.
I think it's sweeter than this example.
It is
the
sweeter.
Guatemalan too.
It doesn't have those. We were talking about that sort of like brown sugar character. This doesn't have that. It's more of just like the white sugar.
Like pineapple.
Yeah, pineapple. Oh, there's yes.
Man, that finish is very like creme brulee.
Little vanilla cream soda kind
Yeah.
of finish.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow.
And maybe even a little of that smoke still even there, that like super light. Because I mean, creme brulee, if you're comparing it to that, it's been singed, it's been seared.
Citrusy.
I feel like if you were to ask me, do you think coffee blossom honey tastes like coffee? I'd say, oh no, that's ridiculous. It kind of has a little bit of
But then,
coffee flavor
yeah.
to it.
Well, this one more than the other one, I think. We're both noting it. There's, I don't know if you want to call it smoke, roast, caramelization,
Earthy.
Maillard, whatever. It's
Yeah.
That one is way more pronounced.
Oh, there's the roast.
Yeah, it's almost like white stout. You know, when you have a white stout and you just can't get past it and you drink it, you're like, it's a blonde. And then like 3 seconds later, you're like, there's the coffee. That's very
Oh
interesting.
yeah, the fruit was
Or the
coming.
chocolate.
It was getting me first, and now when I smell it again,
It's like if you would have done like dry beaning your
Yeah.
fruit punch, where you're gonna get like coffee aroma, but it's like a tropical fruity drink. Kind of weird, but neat.
So I wanted to ask, this is going to be way longer than we thought, but people that like it are going to like it at this point. Additives, you know, we've talked about honey, oak. You've both mentioned separately acid, tannins, getting there kind of naturally through fermentation or having to add it afterwards. What does a traditional mead most often kind of need to kind of like support it a little bit? I guess we've already answered that question, but I guess my point is, how do you know when you get to the end if it kind of needs some of these, and what kind of hand do you deal?
well, you have to have a goal in mind. What are you making? What do you want to make? Are you making a dry mead, a semi-sweet mead, a sweet mead? So, you know, how are you going to get there? Are you going to ferment dry and then back sweeten? Are you going to try to stall fermentation or stop fermentation at the residual sweetness level you like? So, you know, start with a goal and then, you know, figure out what are my steps to get there. For me, I would just ferment dry and then back sweeten.
Yeah.
And
do that.
Josh has talked about stopping fermentation.
Yeah, I like to just arrest fermentation because with most of mine I have a target final gravity in mind, just based on the recipe or based on the honey and having worked with it before. So I like to cold crash and clarify and rack off and sulfite and sorbate. And so there's a process that works for that. I know folks on the mead forums are going to say, you can't do it, it doesn't work. Done it for years. 90% of the batches I've done, sorry, it works.
Some people say you can't cold crack, like you can't.
No, they say you can't stop fermentation reliably,
Oh,
which you just have to have a good process for it.
Right, exactly. What is your you have to figure out the process, and what is your process? What works for you? I mean, I'm kind of lazy, and I don't monitor my mead. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Gotta be a little more hands-on.
Yeah, and so I won't monitor my mead. I'll just like let it. You know, okay, it's going to ferment dry, and then I'm going to back sweeten it.
But for achieving that balance, what is it missing and how do you know that? It's a lot like cooking. Like when you're cooking something, how do you know it needs a little bit more pepper or a little more salt? With mead, you've tasted enough meads that you can recognize when something's missing. And so when acidity would help, when tannin would help, when carbonation would help.
And so often, so when I get the mead to where I want it to be, after back sweetening it. I'll taste it. Like, okay, I think that's good. And then I'll do bench trials where I'll take, I'll have a control and I'll have a few samples and I'll add a little acid to each one of them and see, does it need anything? Is it better? Does it taste better? Do I want to drink more of that one or this one? And sometimes it's like, yeah, maybe it needs a little acid. Often it's like, no, it's good. So,
yeah, and for meads like this where, we have a very similar recipe, similar process. When you're making a lot of varietal trads and you're like, okay, I have a very similar recipe in mind, I might change the yeast, I might, there's not as many variables you're going to change. In your recipe design that you're going to finish at a fairly balanced product, so you might select a yeast that has more crispness or acidic impression. You might add a little bit of tannin along the way because it's going to end up about where you want it, and that's just having done it a bunch, like tasting it and knowing, okay, this is a little thin, it's a little blah, the finish isn't crisp, the finish just is kind of flat, and so you kind of start to recognize when it's missing a little something.
one of the biggest flaws is people who meads that are over acidified. When you're adding acid, you want to get to the point where it's like, oh, that's crisp, and I want to drink some more, and not to the point where it's like, oh, it's just all like biting. And
What is the acid level of these two against each other? Like, I feel like the Hawaiian one, I don't know if it's carbonation making me think that, but I feel like the Hawaiian one is a little higher acid.
I think mine is a little flabby, actually. I think it needs a touch of acidity.
So I like to do acid by letting when it's in my mouth, I let the mead drop below my tongue, and so you can get a sense in your mouth of how much it's salivating. So that's how I like to gauge acidity. But
Would acidity make it salivate more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And the carbonation, in my experience, just plays the same role. So I like to carbonate a lot of mine, and then I hardly ever end up acidifying after the fact, because I've already designed a recipe that I know with carbonation is pretty about where I want it.
Yep.
That's awesome. Dude, that Hawaiian one, it is coffee. Like, when you go back to it,
It's better than I remembered. I didn't think it was that good
so
when I
much
tasted it at home.
roasty, almost like cocoa powder, like bitter, kind of like bittersweet cooking chocolate to it.
The first
But it's
times
so
I've tasted it, it was so tropical that I was like, there's got to be Lehua in here, right? Like, it's like, is this really coffee blossom? Because it's so fruity. But I just wonder if it's just these Hawaiian honeys are fruity.
All the surrounding floral sources that are also going into it.
Island honeys.
Yeah, exactly.
Could be.
So we can keep drinking meads all night because we have a big box of them. But if you were to say the last one to round out this flight of 8, what should we do?
Well, it's got to be 2.
Okay. I'm not arguing. We have Fletty's house, y'all. Lift.
We got to
This
do the
episode
leatherwood.
Brought to you by Lift.
We got to do the leatherwood. We got to do the umlo.
Okay.
That's a pretty cool side-by-side.
It is.
I don't know if anybody's ever drank these side-by-side.
I'm going to need another sheet of
History
paper.
of mead.
I think umo is related to leatherwood.
Yes.
I've heard
They have
that.
the same, I think, genus.
Yes.
Not the same species.
So which one of those two is up first? The L dubs, it looks like.
Maybe the umo, because I think that
Oh,
one's
okay.
more intense than this one.
I'd agree. Is this one a suitcase honey?
Yes, this is. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Suitcase honey.
Now, tell us about Suitcase Honey.
Suitcase honey. Oh, wow. Okay, so I was in Santiago, Chile. I was down there for a beer competition. And we went to this awesome market. Bio Bio is the name of the market. And we found some honey, and I hand carried this back. And it's called Umol. It's unique. And I smelled the honey and tasted the honey when I got back, and I was like, oh man, this is nasty. I don't like this honey. And so it sat for months and months, and I finally fermented it, and it was like, and I tasted it, it's like, wow, that's pretty good.
It's got some like earth and old book to it.
Yeah.
Old
Yeah.
book.
It's
Yeah.
got a little attic, like,
Wow.
Old book. That's interesting. Yeah, but so
but
yeah,
not like oxid. You know what I mean? Like,
I was going to say nutty, but I like old book better.
so you have to get past that nose, but the flavor is, I think.
I don't even think you have to get past it. I mean, sometimes with the nose like that, I mean, it is what it is too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what made what we're doing here even like worth doing is because like not everything smells like orange and everything smells flowery.
Right.
I really like this.
It's like very savory and like dusty sounds like such a bad thing.
Dusty.
Yeah, it's got, I don't know. These are all make it sound worse, but at the end it is also still a sweet, well-balanced trad mead. But these are the things kind of surrounding that. Earthiness, a little muddiness, a little, I mean, these things have got to have better descriptors.
Like dried herbs, dried thyme, I think.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great description. Yeah.
Because that dried...
Super herbal,
like plant matter, dried plant matter kind of thing, where it's...
And so we're in a different spectrum of honeys. They can vary so widely, and we've talked about the fruity ones, the herbal, and yeah. So we're getting into the spectrum where we're going to try another one like this, where they can be divisive. You know, some people are like, oh, that's amazing, and some people are like, oh, I don't know, I don't know, no, get that away from me.
Mm-hmm. You'll get a good Fletty spit take out of the next one. But so this is from Chile?
Yeah.
So we were saying that it's, when we looked it up, it seems like it's botanically, I think you would say, related to leatherwood. So the next one, which we're doing, is honey from Tasmania, which I think a lot of Australian, that area of the world, a lot of their honeys have a lot of eucalyptus.
Oh, that's what it is.
Kind of thing going on.
Right, yeah.
So do you think this Umo has eucalyptus notes?
I think it does. And the flavor, yeah, definitely.
It's from Chile.
Yeah, so...
Is there eucalyptus in Chile?
But just the idea that these are a similar plant,
right?
Even though it's a completely different area of the world, are you still getting some of that eucalyptus?
I gotcha, sorry.
Yeah. I think you do.
Well, let's open it. Just save a little.
All right.
Make sure you save some.
Side by side.
Huh.
The leatherwood, is this... If I remember correctly, this is one that if you crack it in competition, you know what it is pretty much immediately, right?
I don't want to oversell it.
Okay.
Because it has a reputation for being robust. Let's put it that way. So, which for competitions, it's kind of like Russian Imperial Stouts dominating everything because it's the most intense example of the style. So you could say like leatherwood is a danger of dominating other less robust examples because it's very powerful.
Oh.
I haven't had it in a while. It's precious stash.
I appreciate y'all
all
doing
for Silas.
this too. This is got some funk. See, this is a little.
I can see some similarities, but I'm getting more citrus in this one.
Fruit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they seem very different, actually.
Still, the finish is kind of that dried herb kind of thing.
So, what would you did the whole better judge of mead thing. What would you say to people who like encounter like a strange honey they've never had before, and how do you judge that? How do you not
get wowed by the weirdness?
Yeah, exactly. You haven't had it before. It's like, oh, that's amazing. It's like, well, maybe it is and maybe it isn't.
I think you first have to figure out what's a normal character for this honey. So Google is your friend. Also other judges around. Like, has anybody had a leatherwood mead? Like, what would I expect? What would be a normal character out of that? And then once you have a little bit of a baseline for kind of what you're expecting, then you're diving into it like a normal mead where you're saying, how well is this balanced? How is the structure? How long is the finish? Is it pleasant to drink? Do I want to drink more?
Man, I get a little bit of like, or a lot of it actually, of like just Christmas tree pine.
Oh yeah.
Like sap off the trunk, broken in half needle. Like this is
like eucalyptus, cedar, wood.
Yeah.
Some woodiness there.
Is there any oak in this?
I think there's a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, pretty light-handed.
So I guess one question I want to ask for the last honey then is, once something proves to be a good trad, or maybe it wasn't a good trad, but you saw how this honey could be used. How do you then take this honey into a melomel, a piment, a spice? You're like, oh, maybe I will actually put seed, or like, how do you learn from a trad to make it something even, I wouldn't say better, but different, to keep working with the same ingredient?
I think you can let those notes that you get out of it kind of guide you. Like you said, like I might use cedar with that, or you might just look at it as this is going to be a really interesting contrast in something else. Like if I have a berry melomel, maybe I want to use 20% of the honey bill as leatherwood to add more complexity and interest. And so you still might throw it in other styles, but especially because it's such a robust varietal, use it maybe a smaller percentage just to add some complexity.
I think you want to look for complementary or contrasting. What goes with this flavor, or how do I contrast a particular flavor, or how do I broaden out the flavors?
What's an example of like two contrasting flavors that still create something good to taste?
Probably could look at some cocktails like a mojito, right?
Or, there you go.
Mint and lime. You know, they're not all that similar, but
Yeah.
they pair well together.
Sweet, sweet and heat. Ginger and
Spices that pair well with very like rich fruits, like you might do like a peppercorn with a berry.
exactly. Yeah.
Those are very different flavors, but it offsets that just like rich, kind of simple, straightforward berry character with the spice to add more interest.
This has been a fun tasting.
Yeah.
That umo, that's all frickin' umo. That old book, that's all.
Old book honey. It's definitely like it comes off a lot darker than the leatherwood.
It does.
Now that I come back to it, though, it's like a little sherry. It's
Raisin?
a little more like
I think
like tawny port, or not tawny port,
Yeah.
whichever the lighter one is, the tawny.
Where the hell is that one? Is it in this?
Yeah,
That
it's
is
got
a
like
treat.
a dried dark fruit thing going
Doesn't
on.
it?
That's rad.
So this one's not an official flight participant.
Bonus
but
round.
Bonus round.
Bonus
10,
round.
Number 10 will be the wrap-up sip-off. What do we got, Josh?
So this is pomegranate blossom.
Is that even a thing?
So I got this from Z Specialty. I think they're based in California, but I'm not sure if the honey is produced in California, if they're purchased it elsewhere.
Ooh.
Look at that color.
Yeah, very rich, very concentrated.
There's something very rummy about that to me.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. Super floral, got some brown sugar in there.
So this is one where I tasted the honey and I felt like I wanted to go a direction instead of a neutral yeast. And so I used D254, which I think is a Rhone wine.
It's a
strain.
French, yeah, it's
like
a French
Syrah,
yeast. Yep.
which has a lot of like spice character, like cedar. And I thought the cedar type notes would be nice.
Oh yeah.
Like I think I smell it. I think I get a lot of spice and cedar in the aroma. But I think this is a great addition to like melomels to add complexity. Because I think there's still like a little maybe cherry cranberry kind of thing going on, but it's got like a spice.
Definitely.
My cup runneth over. So I'm the only one who actually wrote down, but I'm sure you guys actually have a better mead memory than me. So what would you say we've learned? What were your favorites? What were some what surprised you, Fletty?
What surprised me was the leatherwood. Man, that was I've tasted a number of leatherwoods and I've just been, oh, that's terrible.
Okay.
Because that eucalyptus character is to me offensive. It's just my palate. I don't like it, but I liked that a lot.
I'm glad to get off my lawn with your leatherwood stance. I think that's a big accomplishment. But just you can see the range, right? We started really light and delicate, and then we finished with a lot of robust, really layers of flavor type ones, like the ulmo and the leatherwood. Like these honeys have a lot going on just from the honey alone.
One thing we didn't have, which would have been interesting, and I have never done it, is Eastern versus Western buckwheat. That would have been an interesting addition to the tasting. But I've never actually wanted to do a buckwheat until I've tasted California buckwheat.
I went back to the Holbrook Basswood. It's very minty. Now that we've gone way into these like luscious coffee, eucalyptus,
Richer
fruits. Yeah. You come back to your Minnesotan Basswood. It's very lovely, floral. I mean, I don't make enough meads to be like, I was completely 180'd by blank and blank, but I really liked the Hawaiian coffee blossom just to have those flavors. The leatherwood as well. The hairy vetch, because it was kind of the most like cool, crisp, carbonated. That's what we kind of started with. That's a very crushable mead. The black mangrove, just because visually I see these bees living their best life down in the Keys. Yeah, they go in and they go back. I don't even know where your hive would be if you lived in the Keys. Maybe also in the mangroves? Probably not. All right, so that is the end of our flight. We have other things to eat and drink. Smoked meats, other meads. Thanks, Fletty, for hosting us. Thanks, Josh, for coming down from Brainerd. This has been pretty baller. I just got to be like a fly on the wall and listen to you two kind of technically nerd out. So this was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chip.
Thanks, Chip.
I don't know what else to say. Like, well, maybe we'll get a recipe or two from these.
Whatever you need, man.
Encourage people to make a trad, right? If you're making smash beers, you should be making traditional meads. See what that honey's all about. Chop for chop.
Brew for brew. Mead for mead.
Honey for honey.
Honey for honey.